Welcome to the Transforming Trauma podcast. Transforming Trauma is presented by the NARM Training Institute. I'm your host, Emily Ruth, and I'm so glad you've joined us today. Hi, Transforming Trauma listeners. We're so excited to share the power of healing from complex trauma with all of you. It's inspiring to know that so many of you tune in to learn about how healing from complex trauma is possible. Are you interested in deepening your understanding of NARM? We're excited to present The Inner Circle, NARM's online learning community. Each month, members receive direct mentorship from NARM creator Dr. Lawrence Heller, NARM training director Brad Kammer, and other NARM faculty as they present NARM demonstration sessions and provide extensive debriefs on applying NARM with real clients. They also present live topic webinars that deconstruct the various elements of complex trauma. Members also get access to archived material and other learning resources, as well as access to a private Facebook group with other professionals learning NARM around the world. The Inner Circle is a hub for the international NARM community where people working with complex trauma come together to connect, network, and develop trauma-informed projects to help our world. You, our Transforming Trauma listeners, can receive a free 14-day trial with access to the 3-month archive by visiting www.narmtraining.com/free trial. And now for our interview. My conversation today is with Jac O'Keeffe, the president and founding member of the Association for Spiritual Integrity, known as ASI, an organization with a mission to bring high levels of integrity to the culture of spiritual leadership. Jac O'Keeffe is a theology graduate from the Pontificate University of Ireland with postgraduate studies in adult education. Working as an independent spiritual teacher for more than 15 years, Jac guides people in the unfoldment of their own spiritual journey. Her work includes books, teachings, talks, and retreats aimed to supporting the empowerment of individuals who are done with outsourcing their spiritual awakening. Her books include Born to be Free and How to be a Spiritual Rebel. Please enjoy this conversation with Jac O'Keeffe. All right, Jac, welcome to Transforming Trauma. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Emily.
Yeah, I'm excited for this conversation. Before we pressed record, we were talking about some of the projects that you have going, and I'm excited for you to share those with us. But we like to start this podcast with the question first of, what is it that you would like listeners to get out of our interview today?
I would like people to be stimulated and curious around the role of trauma in terms of how it can teach us, be an opportunity for growth, be an exploration into our humanity, all within the spiritual community. Spiritual leaders, spiritual teachers, religious affiliated, non-affiliated, and how does that human aspect of trauma link within the spiritual leadership sector? To be curious about that.
All right. I love it. And that's so aligned. To be honest with you, this has been part of my own personal journey more recently. So I'm so excited for this conversation. In that spirit of being curious, I wondered if you could first tell us how you came to the work that you're doing and especially how you're holding trauma side by side with this spiritual piece, because that's so often neglected and not seen.
Yes, I think the linkage is not spoken about at all. I'm so thrilled that we have a platform here right now on this Transforming Trauma initiative to say, hey, why would spiritual leaders be exempt from this aspect of our humanness? And for myself, it started, I suppose, in Catholic school in Ireland a long time ago now. In my teens, I had a lot of lay teachers, and the lay teacher was teaching us religion. And that, of course, is a version of Catholicism. Now, Catholicism in Ireland is much looser than Catholicism in the US. That has to be said first. It is much looser. This teacher was talking and advising us, around, I suppose, ethics and how to be good. And at 15 years old, like, what do you teach? And I said, but miss, have you had experience of this? Like, have you done what's wrong? And how do you deal with it when you screw up? And have you had sex? And you're teaching us about sex. And she looked at us and she just said, I don't have a lot of the experiences you're talking about. So I went up to her after class and I said, why are you teaching things you don't know about? It just seemed a complete and total nonsensical approach to education. And I was 15. And I went on to study theology and music in university in order to right this wrong, because, as a teenager, you're all self-righteous and you want to change the world and you believe you can.
Mm-hmm.
And in university, I discovered, oh gosh, they want me to. Actually, the professor of moral theology told me, Jac, you have to regurgitate the teachings. He used the word regurgitate.
Wow.
Yeah. And I went, okay, I'm out. And so I did finish my degree, but in a very disconnected drug way, drug-like brain way, because I'm like, all right, I couldn't quit for financial reasons. I wasn't on a grant. My parents were paying for it. They were close to retiring. So I continued with a lot of drugs and alcohol. And so it led me into, I can't teach this stuff. This is not aligned at all with honesty, with integrity. It is some other brainwashing set of dogma and morality tenets that are disconnected from our humanness. And so I went into education. I went into the social aspect of community development. I went into the arts, but always looking at these media like alternative education and the arts for social inclusion. And then my spiritual path changed my life and turned me upside down at the age of 30. And spent a few years in India, spent a lot of time in silence. Huge transformations happened in how I see the world, in my perception. I had done an awful lot of therapy. I went into therapy when I was 19 because it was free in university. So I was very familiar with watching my mind and self-awareness. And as I became, I suppose, more spiritually aware of myself, eventually I became a spiritual teacher. And I did that for the last 15 years. And I've written some books and I have toured very much internationally. And that work eventually brought me to the recognition of, oh gosh, this misalignment with our own inner integrity and what we teach is rife within the spiritual leadership community also. And why is that? And so 5 years ago now, 2018, I was involved in setting up the Association for Spiritual Integrity to help spiritual leaders to do better. It offers a platform where we talk about these things, where we open a safe and sometimes brave space, where we, I suppose, identify ourselves as leaders who are not running from our own humanness, not hiding behind the cloak, the uniform, the mala beads, but are in some way figuring out how we can embrace our humanness and teach or lead from a place of more integrity and autonomy. How do we bring the human in all its beautiful imperfections front and central into what it means to awaken, to align with your divine essence, or to be mindful, whatever aspect of spirituality people are familiar with. I'm including all of it, all of it. And so that's been my own trajectory, I suppose, and it feels like I've gone a full circle since the age of 15. I'm now 56. It took me a while to get here. 40 years, my goodness, to actually, I now understand better, or I'm beginning to understand, would be more truthful, what it is that happens to us spiritual leaders that encourages and supports our own blindness to our humanity. This is the work I want to do now, is to say, hey, let's look at this, let's talk about this and see what can be done so that we're more honest in how we teach and in what we teach.
I'm just feeling so touched in this moment. Those words that you said, running from our own humanness, how much we see that in so many realms of life, but certainly in spiritual and, religious
Yeah.
communities, that we're kind of running from the
Yes.
fact that we're human or trying to run. We can't outrun it, but that really landed for me. And I just so appreciate the work that you're doing. So
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm curious, because you mentioned the trauma piece and how kind
Mhm.
of connected they are. I
Mhm.
wonder if you could speak a little bit more about that and how you hold that term. Like, what do you mean when you talk about trauma?
I think it would be useful if there was an understanding among all people that as soon as we go through the birthing process, trauma has registered.
That's right.
It's like we all got a human body. I would welcome if it was that obvious and that accepted. Thankfully, we now have platforms to speak about trauma which is relatively recent, really, that it's become mainstream. I don't know why it's taken so long. And as maybe we didn't have language about it or opportunities to share openly. And we're just now, I think, beginning to move into the space of questioning. Why did we not talk about this? What patterns have we set up in our communication, in our way of leading, in our way of following, in our way of being human? What patterns have we set up that has allowed the dialogue around trauma to be ignored since the birth of civilization? Why? Sure, there's a lot of indigenous cultures that have always spoken about trauma, but mainstream Western civilization? Oh, no. No, we haven't. We're the ones who call ourselves civilized, which is really embarrassing, really, that we're that obnoxious. So it has been repositioned into something we don't want to see, deemed as bad or a fault. And it's central to our human experience, and looking at ways that we can leave space for it. Like, there's no place in my brain that I place a quality of negativity on trauma. It would be like placing a negative value on our physical body. And our body is such a beautiful self-healing machine. So is our capacity to feel and be informed by trauma and about trauma. And like, even if you do look at some mostly outdated now religious practices of where the body is punished, like from extreme self-flagellation to like denial of our sexuality, denial of food and water in an unhealthy way for religious, spiritual brownie points. Now, there is a place for these things, but also they have been misused. And part of that same trajectory of punishing the body, seeing it as something that can take us off track, that is harmful. It's natural that we have then seen trauma as another thing that needs to be hidden, and that its exploration means that we're denying some aspect of our divinity. And it's the opposite, in fact. It's about the inclusion of all aspects of our experience. The inclusion of everything is what brings us towards the divine oneness and deeper than that lens of perception. There is no part of ourselves that can be shunned, but I would welcome, with my teaching hat on, it's like, bring it in. Bring in your desires that you don't want to talk to anybody about. Let's see what's going on there. And when we bring in parts of ourselves that we have learned to deny, we find that the root thought and belief and experience is trauma. Underneath these things that we want to deny, there is trauma. And so opening conversations about trauma is essential to an integrated, mature spiritual community in our contemporary cultures.
Gosh, what you're sharing here is so rich. And I have like 10 questions and 10 thoughts and things that I want to. First, I just want to say I so appreciate this piece of how you're linking the body, and even that first piece that you said about how denying trauma being a part of the experience is kind of is like akin to shutting
Yes.
down our body, or saying that our body
Yes.
is not, I
Yes.
use the word sacred or holy. I mean, I know those can be
Yes.
loaded words for folks, but how linked that is, that the experience of being in our body, it's similar to how we can deny our trauma and what that
That's right.
experience means for us. And
That's
so
right.
I love what you're saying. It feels
Yeah.
so I feel it in my bones.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah. So that's how you're holding trauma. Can you say a little bit more? Because you mentioned this piece of like denying the sexuality, or even food and water. Like, these are kind of
Mm,
different ways that we can
mm,
relate in our body. But I'm curious if you can maybe even drill down a little bit more in terms of the trauma piece, and how you see that, or how you've seen it.
mhm, mhm. I think, critical thought is useful, and a deeper sense of honesty with ourselves, because when something is not lined up, we're not being completely honest, we feel it in our bodies. That's where you feel that, this feels a little bit sticky. Now, if you are somebody who meditates a lot and you haven't integrated the experience of meditation into your body, you will and can and will at some point lose that connection with your body. you lose your capacity to hear when something is off. And in my own experience, that disconnection from our body that can happen through extensive spiritual practice leads us to denying, leads us to having our own traumatic experiences in the shadow, off there in the enclaves of our humanness that we simply don't know that it's essential to visit and open up. We have two real issues, I think, that are the pillars of trauma influencing less than optimal behavior within spiritual leadership aspect and our own unowned and denied trauma as spiritual leaders that we all have. Now, as I just said, a lot of us in spiritual leadership have spent a long time in spiritual practice, and we learn how to deny, how to disconnect from our body, and how to completely function really effectively and be a great teacher and have no clue at all of what's buried in our body and of our own history. That is not helping any student teaching from that place. The second piece that is central to the issues that we're looking at within spiritual leadership is that trauma can be given to spiritual students. Trauma can be imposed. Trauma can be created. Re-traumatization happens a lot when spiritual leaders and teachers are not trauma-informed, have not done the work on themselves, and have been conditioned to a very limited set of tools to impart their spiritual teachings. And then there is a practice in some traditions called crazy wisdom, where you use violence. You shout or you use a stick to make somebody see, yes, your emotional reaction to me shouting at you is what we need to heal. No, what we need to heal is why the teacher believes that it's okay to shout at somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
You see? Or the teacher saying, yeah, you can sleep on the floor on that straw mat for 2 years and then then we'll see. And that doesn't help anybody, actually. There is nothing that can be taught through hardship that cannot be taught with compassion and love. And anybody who does know me as a teacher knows that I'm not let's all be kumbaya and happy clappy approach to our spirituality. It's quite the opposite. I don't take any prisoners at all. I work with people who have seen through the authoritarian guru model. I work with people who are done with outsourcing their spiritual leadership to somebody else, who don't want a parent, but somebody who will guide their way forward. If anybody, any student of a spiritual teacher feels they don't have their own personal power or their own autonomy while they're working with their teacher, their own agency, we have trauma embedded in the relationship between teacher and student. And quite likely the teacher is not trauma informed. And it's possible the teacher has not looked at their own story.
Yeah. Two things are coming up for me as you're saying this. First, this keystone piece of agency and how important that is, how vital that is. It's so aligned with how we hold agency in NARM that it's vital.
Yes.
You can't do without it.
Yes.
And if you don't have it, that's a traumatic experience right there.
Yes.
And then this other piece, what kept coming to mind as you were talking about that is it feels so similar to like a generational trauma. So in a spiritual practice or with teachers, leaders kind of passing it down almost like generational trauma. And if they haven't looked at it, just like if we haven't looked at our own generational trauma in family systems, if we haven't looked at the trauma inside of spiritual or religious systems, it's just getting passed down.
It gets passed down.
Mm-hmm.
It's within the very same structure. That's beautiful that you've drawn a parallel there. That's absolutely spot on. That's how it works. Yeah. And so, for a teacher then in contemporary times to go, oh, I know this was done to me and I need to stop doing it. Just like a parent, this was done to me. I need to raise my kids differently. How do I do this? That person who's pivoting onto a different way of sharing and educating, there is an extra bind for a spiritual leader, because a spiritual leader will probably still have a devotional or an obedience relationship with their teacher. Whether they are in body or have passed already, it doesn't matter. But that guru-disciple thing often continues, especially in a place where we have a lineage. So, like, let's say in a family system, down the mother line came some self-criticism. All right. And so this self-criticism track is really, really strong, and you're trying to break it. There will be a time of where you go, I need to revisit the boundaries with my mother. I need to find my own agency in my relationship with my mother. All right. Now, in a spiritual sector, if you're looking at finding your own agency against your own guru or teacher or lineage, whoa, that has an otherworldly potency. They are your family.
Yeah.
They are your connection with God. They are the reason that you had an elevated sense of consciousness, so that enabled you to be identified as a teacher in the first place. So there are all these other traditions that hold a lot of weight, that your now chosen career or vocation, whichever category it falls into, can be threatened by. We have some teachers who stop teaching because it's like, how can I be part of this lineage? Because I've been traumatized by it so hugely. And I can't separate the teachings from the method, which was so traumatic. How do I do that?
Yeah.
Right? So we have other loadings, double bind, triple binding value systems that are involved within the constituency of spiritual leadership.
Yeah.
Tricky, huh?
Yeah. And as you were
Oof.
saying that, it just, could feel it in my body, that the
Yes.
binds, the double binds, the triple binds that you're talking
Yes.
about. And I just think of what a tragedy, because
Yes.
here is someone who is seeing it, who is
Yes.
looking, really facing it and looking
Yes.
at it. And what a tragedy and a loss and I understand we got to do what we got to do.
Yeah.
But if they're stepping away from the system and maybe not teaching or moving forward,
Yeah.
what a loss, because they actually could bring something
Yes.
into the system to help with that
Yes.
pivot that you talked
Yes.
about.
Yes. And I'm very hopeful that these opportunities, like what you guys are offering, will allow more teachers to go, oh my God, that's me. That's me. I've just been too scared to look at it, because I would need to step back and look at the whole thing.
Yeah.
Can we set up support systems, and what would they look like to allow spiritual leaders to take that time, or even to stay in their work? Is that possible, to stay in their work and get support to weed out and pull these things apart? Now, coupled with that, there is a very real circumstance that happens within spiritual leadership, where spiritual leaders feel that there's nobody that they can talk to. So I've often spoken to colleagues of mine and said, go to a therapist, but I can't go to a therapist because they don't understand the perspective I'm looking from, because of my consciousness is different. Once you do a lot of spiritual work, sure, awakening happens, or abiding awakening happens, realizations happen, and it shifts how you view the world. And there seems to be this myth that a regular psychotherapist cannot in any way help. And what I have found, because I have gone back in to work with psychotherapists since my shifts in perspective, and what I have discovered is that it's very difficult for us to take off the hat of being a teacher. Stop being a teacher and be with the human who is there now. Don't try and fix the psychotherapist, because we have a lens of perception, especially if we teach a lot for many years without support for ourselves as humans. You know, we have a hammer. Everything is a nail. Everything is a nail. Anything at all that a psychotherapist will say that can scratch some old door within me that I haven't opened. And if they're threatening, I can absolutely use my spiritual tools to see that this is their issue, that they're projecting. Oh, I can turn it. I will find any spiritual teaching. Loads of them will do. Loads of them will do, where I will make it the psychotherapist's problem. They're not awake enough. They're not aware enough. They don't see the full part of me. They, you see? So
Yeah.
we have all these, I suppose the systemic authoritarian model has built in strategies to keep us within the system, to keep us promoting and enforcing the system. And the system itself is trying to break down.
Wow, that really just landed for me, and I think, it could go both ways. Therapists, we can
Yes,
we can get into
yes,
that role of like, and
yes,
everything is
yes,
a nail. But I so appreciate what you're saying here. Again, it leads me back to that your original intention of like, can we get curious?
yes.
What does that look like? If
Yes.
we can just get curious in those moments when it feels like, oh, this is a nail. I need to hammer on this. Wait a second.
Wait a second. Yes. Where are they looking from? What are other people teaching me about me? And the tricky thing is, like with awakening, there is a phase. I'm specifically talking about, like, not every religion looks at that shift in perspective and the enlightenment, that awakening. But I just got to talk about it for a minute because it seems to be very popular right now. So that shift in perspective, if that happens to somebody where the self-referencing network is modified or turned off in our brain, there tends to be a phase of where there is no individual inside. You lose the capacity. It's a shift in your brain. You lose the capacity to self-reference. And so you literally don't have the ability to see, oh, this is about me. And so it's always about the other person because there's nobody here anyway. There is nothing in here. There is no capacity. You lose the map to self-reference, to analyze, to consider something. So therefore, you lose the connection between accountability and personal ownership of your accountability. You literally have switched off the default mode network. So there is a phase in that non-dual awakening whereby you actually can't do it. Now, that's different to people who might have narcissistic behaviors, who are, rushed by chemicals of adoration and wanting to feel powerful and have no capacity to empathize with somebody else's pain. That happens too. I don't know of any conversations where they're talking about, hey, what do we do about people who are teaching too early, who don't have the emotional maturity, who don't know what has happened inside their brain, and who should not be teaching at all when there is an inability to find the personal I, when it's being denied. That's a real thing, and it's quite dangerous because it teaches followers or students to deny your own humanness.
That's right.
It's like, well, that's a me story. That's my drama. I don't do drama. It's like, there is a time for not doing drama, but you have to do trauma work. And if you're going to call that drama, we have an emotional immaturity here. There's a lot of issues, huh?
Yeah. And I'm just thinking, I've talked to folks that have kind of named exactly what you're saying is like, I was taught to kind of shut down and not self-reflect.
Yes.
We don't do that.
That's right.
And so raising up a whole nother generation of kind of blindness.
That's right.
There when it comes to the self. Yeah.
Yeah. And promoting blindness.
Yeah. Like that's the right thing.
That's right.
To do.
That's right. And then if you look at a lot of religions, especially the religions that have like that institutionalized God is on high, or the Pope, or the spiritual male leader is on top, and down we go down. And there are some with feminine leaders.
Sure.
Sometimes they still continue with the hierarchical model. And within that, I will be rewarded if I am obedient. I will be ostracized if I question the leader. I'll be thrown out. That happens in all kinds of cults, in guru model, that happens. If you don't drink the Kool-Aid, to go. And the other students will throw you out. So we're promoting the absence of questioning. We're promoting the absence of self-reflection and promoting the absence of agency in many of these models.
So there's two things that come to mind as you're talking about that. The first one is you said earlier you're hopeful. So
yes.
I do want to hear, like, what are you hopeful about? Tell me more. But I mean, what feels kind of related to that is this piece of like, okay, so what if someone has that kind of aha moment that you mentioned, like, oh, that's me. Like I'm realizing now. And so you just talked about how someone can be thrown out of a community.
Yes.
And if someone is truly wanting to help and be supportive and be a teacher, that's a passion of theirs to show up, even as they're noticing, okay, this is problematic for me. But if I put my eyes on it, if I name it, I'm going to be thrown out and then I won't be teaching anyway. So I'm going to try to fit myself into this square hole when I'm a circle. Like, what do we do with that? And then maybe, like I said, I'm hoping that's related to your hope. Like, is there something that can be done?
Yeah, there's a lot we have yet to do.
Yeah.
We, as in globally, I don't know how this is going to spring up, but gosh, I seem to have this undeniable passion that rises up from someplace deep in my being. Like, I would love to kind of sit by the pool and retire. But something wants to happen around this, something wants to happen. And there's no part of me that says no to this. It's like I'm full of yes. And I trust when there's something deep within my being that is so potent. I trust that it has a wisdom within it that is valuable for more than myself. So a lot of my hope is innate faith and trust.
Mm.
And then on a practical human level, I would love if people that you've just identified there, Emily, who are like, yeah, that's kind of an inkling of there's something going on in my spiritual community that doesn't quite sit with me, but I haven't found the vocabulary. I don't know where to voice it. Here's one thing you can do. Ask your teacher, do you have a grievance process whereby we can give you feedback or constructive criticism? See what happens.
Yeah.
Here's the second thing you can do. I would like to see your code of ethics. And if a teacher denies, I don't need a code of ethics, I stand in truth, walk. If they are not accountable and if they are not willing to abide by a code that has integrity, that has do no harm in it, that guides the teacher or guru to operate from the heart. If they don't have a code of ethics where they are being accountable, there is some questions to be asked around their own guiding principles, because their relationship with the divine, their own connection to sacredness is theirs. That came because of their life history. You have to establish your own. You can't hobby horse on your teacher's one.
Mm-hmm.
Your teacher is there to be a mirror, to guide you to find it within you. So where's their code of ethics? They need to be accountable so that their human modality of being a teacher, fulfilling the role of a teacher, has principles that are embedded with the sacredness of what they probably recognize inside. How does it penetrate their humanness? And this is where a code of ethics comes in. So a half-baked teacher or somebody who's teaching too early will deny the need for a code of ethics. If they deny the need for a code of ethics, they're teaching too soon. They're teaching too soon. Where do they get a code of ethics? Spiritual-integrity.org is one source.
Okay.
Our website and the Association for Spiritual Integrity.
Mm-hmm.
But I know, like in the Diamond Approach, for example, those teachers in the Diamond Approach, they have a code of ethics. How informed are the students about the code of ethics? What's the system of accountability in that code of ethics? So, like, some organizations were ahead of us in creating codes of ethics. Yoga Alliance has a code of ethics, but systems of accountability for Yoga Alliance, it's not in place. They just haven't taken it on. So we're only just at the start of teachers in all aspects of spirituality need some system of being accountable. And how do we do that in a way that's loving, that's supporting, that's welcoming in our own trauma stories, our own shadow? We have to create a context. And I think that's why we're not already there. Like around Yoga Alliance having a system of accountability. What are they going to do? What would it look like? Would it be punitive? Would it be throwing people out? Would it be
Right.
just kicking people off the register of qualified yogas? Like, what happens there around your licensing?
Yeah.
Is there ongoing licensing for all places? And is ethics trained and taught in a way that is, body centric and compassionate and creating a safe and brave space for people to embody an ethical and integrous approach in their work? We have so much to do. There's so much in the spiritual domain. It's like we spent centuries, navel gazing and being inside in meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of the world, of course, sexual harassment is now, we're protected by law against sexual harassment. Thank heaven. It's like the spiritual community hasn't touched any of it. The corporate is streets ahead of us. And we have the audacity to blame the corporate, to be like based on capitalism and these values that are, denying equality and equity. And it's like, let's just not throw stones yet.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Let's take a look at ourselves.
Let's take a look at ourselves. And that's what we don't know how to do. We don't have supportive systems. And that's the organization that I helped set up. It's
Yeah.
like, how do we create a community and peer support? And, like we're creating a model of peer support because there's nothing there. So we have to do it from scratch through trial and error, gathering data, finding out what works. And we're in the process of wrapping up our second pilot of peer support for spiritual leaders. And what that looks like is we have 8 different groups of spiritual teachers and leaders. Everybody, it's their full-time job to be a spiritual leader in any denomination, any tradition. And they meet every 2 weeks in a small group of no more than 6 in a supportive environment because we want to offer them a place where there's somebody that they can talk to. And yet, 2 of those 8 groups have members who are saying, we only have to sit in stillness. Why are you kind of like bringing up dirt that's completely illusory? Like, I've been told that what we're doing is kindergarten work,
Oh, interesting.
that inviting in shadow work is kindergarten, that if we just sit in
Uh-huh.
awareness, these issues dissolve. It's like, okay, this is avoidance. This is the very problem.
Right.
This is the problem. Quite interesting, huh?
There's so much that you said there. I mean, what jumps out at me first is this again, it's drawing me back to that hope of that your organization is set up to help these
Yeah.
leaders. And I'm thinking much like a therapist, we have consultation groups and we
Yes.
meet and we check in and we check,
Yes.
on our own, like what is best practice here in this situation. We have to consult. And
Yes.
that's what I'm kind of hearing a mirror that's what you're doing with and how important that is. How
Yeah.
beautiful that you're creating that you've
Yeah.
created that.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm,
there's a lot to be done, which is very exciting. And we don't have a template that's appropriate for our, the spiritual community at large, spiritual and
yeah.
religious. We don't have a template. So we have to build into whatever model, we have to build ongoing growth, ongoing reflection. Otherwise, we're going to set up another system like the
Right.
authoritarian head, obedience
Mhm.
model. Like it
Mhm.
cannot be that.
Mm.
So, how do we make this moving, ongoing growth process part of
Yeah.
a new model? Create space for shadow work and
Yeah.
for accountability around how we do, in fact, traumatize our
Mhm.
students at times.
Mhm. That is so exciting and hopeful.
Yeah.
It's giving me hope. The idea that
Yay.
you've already created 8 groups of folks, and 6 of those 8 are really engaging.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. I wondered in our remaining time if you could tell us, do you have any examples of kind of how someone has struggled through this and maybe kind of come on another side? Not that the process ever stops, but I wonder if you could share with us anything in that realm.
Yeah. We have a code of ethics, as I said, and then we have a system of accountability whereby there is a complaint form that any student can bring to us. And if the student wants us to contact the teacher, we can do that, or we would have recommended mediators if they want to talk to the teacher in that way. So it's been interesting. We've had very few complaints from students about teachers who are signed up to a code of ethics. Very few.
Mm.
Lots of complaints that we can't do anything about except open an empathic ear, because I'm not going to go after a teacher who has no. We're not the police. That's the authoritarian model. That's not what
Mm.
we're doing at all. And so the system of accountability at the moment, I've seen models of where a student goes through our code of ethics. That's the complaint form. And they got to say, yep, tenant number 13, a sexual advancement was made to me on this date at this time. This is what was said. And they record for us. So that's the line of the code that was broken. And this is how, and this is when, and this is what happened. And then we bring it to the teacher if the student will let us. We bring it to the teacher. And we will be tightening this up as we evolve. I wonder, will we be considering soon if a complaint is made, it goes to the teacher, whether the student wants to be anonymous or not, it has to go to the teacher. That's coming. That's coming.
Yeah.
And so I have seen examples of what happens. Here's the general MO is that the teacher at first is like, it's projection. No, that student has stuff that, well, maybe then some system of having students who are ready for your teaching would be useful.
Oh, okay.
Aha. And everything we discover brings us into a whole new, oh my God, that's a whole other body of work. That's a whole other
Yeah.
project.
Yeah.
And so we're discovering new needs. that are necessary in order to have less trauma created between spiritual teachers and students. Or re-traumatization, actually, is what
Yeah.
happens in most cases. It's interesting when we get through the layer of the teacher defending themselves, when we get through the layer of the teacher recognizing that they weren't a good fit in the first place, and could I have seen it earlier that that student wasn't a good fit?
Yeah.
Once those two defense mechanisms are out of the way, it's only then the teacher can, oh, maybe there's something about me here. Maybe there's something about me. So it's interesting that defense, that's what we do first.
Sure.
And then it's like, oh, actually, I do need to upgrade my trauma informed skills.
Yeah.
I do need to, okay, I did miss something. And it's beautiful when we arrive at that place, because that's what I'm looking for. It's like, hey, come on, some part of it is
Yeah.
about you. Of course, it's about you. What is there to be learned? What is there to be learned? And sometimes it really is about you just take everybody. You just take everybody. So somebody who's just projecting a parent onto you,
Mm.
you've no way of vetting that at all. Is that working for you? You know,
Right.
sometimes it's that kind of a moment. I don't have that tone when I'm talking to a spiritual teacher now, but
Yeah.
just for the ease of communication, it's kind of like,
Mhm.
that doesn't work for us. It doesn't work
Yeah.
for us. I've had that happen to me, of course. People want me to be their mama and papa and approve of them and love them. And it's like, I have to refer you to a therapist, a loving therapist. I'll find one for you. But that's not me. To be the parent that you didn't have, that's not me. You know?
Mm.
And how do we set up systems to allow for referral? Do we refer? Do we have a list of people that we're comfortable referring to? Do we just tell the student, you need to go to therapy without any guiding principle of what they're looking for and what would be a good fit?
Mhm.
There's so many layers, but I'm hopeful because I have seen teachers go, yeah, yeah, I definitely played some part in that. Not all of it, but I played some part in it.
Mhm.
It's like, yay, you know?
And how wonderful that you've created this space for that learning and that
Mm,
it's not another, like you said, that you're not creating another top-down kind of
that's right.
situation where you're like, "Oh, you're out."
That's right. That's
There's no
right.
space for you to, like, learn and have
That's
grace
right.
for yourself and, learn what you need to learn and become
Yes.
what you need to become.
Yes.
I love that you've created that space because
Yeah.
that's the hope, and I think that's the only way. Having that kind of space is the only way that leaders are going to ever be able to engage and
Yes.
say, "Okay, here's my humanness. Here's where I've faltered. Here's
Yeah.
the gaps. And I'm going to go to this place where there's kindness and containing boundaries that can help me learn what I need to learn to become
Yes.
better." Like
That's right.
that's so valuable.
That's right. That's right.
Wow.
And if spiritual leaders and teachers feel there's no one I can talk to, and I can't go to a psychotherapist because they wouldn't understand me, imagine that loneliness, that sense of being disconnected from fellow human beings, that we've created this niche of no support. So, of course, we disconnect from our own humanness because there's too much there. It's not being met anywhere.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not being met.
Uh-huh.
So, what services do we need for spiritual teachers?
Yeah.
Lots,
Yeah.
lots.
Well, that kind of brings us right to this final piece. Maybe first I should ask if there's anything else that you'd like to share with our community that feels important for us to know about the work that you're doing.
I suppose not to blame spiritual teachers for being where they're at. We are a product of a hierarchical system. And yeah, our capacity to self reflect has been limited and corralled within a specific place. And so coming to a teacher saying, do you have a code of ethics? To do so in the spirit of compassion rather than the spirit of accusation would be really useful for us as spiritual leaders. So the human to human connection is really important for us too. And students can open that up for teachers also. Our students can inform us, guide us, demonstrate how to reconnect with our humanness when
Yeah.
we have forgotten. And so I would like, spiritual followers and students to help us, you know?
Oh, I feel touched by that. That's such a beautiful, open-hearted way of approaching the
Yeah,
work and what
yeah.
you're doing. And yeah, again, I'm just so appreciative of what it is that you're doing. I had one more question actually as you
Yes.
were just talking. It feels
Uh-huh.
important. So if someone's hearing this, they're a spiritual teacher, they want to be involved and recognize that there's space for them to have this kind of integration and understanding. I'm wondering if they would ask, is this like a confidential process? What does this look like? If they're
Yeah.
concerned about, I'm not sure if I don't want joining this organization to be sort of a condemnation of that I must be doing something wrong, but I'm curious what that's
Yeah.
like when someone
Yeah.
approaches you.
Yeah. We tend to get spiritual leaders who want to do better,
Mhm.
who are willing to be accountable. And so we encourage people, hey, it's not easy to take those steps, but we're doing this together. And so there is a sense of community within us spiritual leaders who've joined. So we have community webinars that are open to everybody.
Mm.
And there's a very nice feeling of sharing ideas and discussing these things about every 6 weeks, 7 weeks.
Mm.
We have an open, free webinar. And that creates a sense of community. And when we run different projects like the Peer Support Pilot Project, when we run different projects, you find out about them in the newsletter, come and join the conversation because we're at the conversation phase. There will always be conversation because ongoing growth has to be embedded in our model. And when the accountability, if a student does create a complaint, it goes to an evaluation and restoration team, a small team of 2 people who look at it. And we don't know about that. That happens completely confidential. And the evaluation and restoration team, they're not listed on the website. They're nowhere. They're nowhere.
Yeah.
And one person from that team will meet the teacher and the student and see where they both can meet. And if they can meet, and sometimes they can't, sometimes they don't want to. And all of these variables are allowed. They're all accommodated. It's about responding to what we're ready for, what we're able for. So we do it with love and compassion and in the spirit of ongoing growth and development that we're trying to support in each other. There's a lot of honesty and vulnerability is nurtured.
Oh, I'm just feeling so touched. Again, I know I've said that like 3 times, but I'm so appreciative of the work that you're doing, and I'm sure listeners will want to come in contact with the work that you're doing, and I wonder if
Yeah.
you could share with us how listeners can do that.
So our website is spiritual-integrity.org. Sign up for the newsletter. There's one every 6 or 7 weeks. Come to a webinar. They vary between like somebody who's talking about, writing a book, or they've written essays on documenting abuse within a spiritual lineage, right through to cults, right through to, I don't know, like female-led organizations, right through to shadow work. I mean, all kinds of stuff.
Sounds so
All
diverse,
topics. It's
exciting.
really diverse. Yeah, it's
Oh,
really
I love it.
diverse. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of just talking. And so, that would be a place to start. Join the newsletter, come to a webinar, see what you think. And if you're a spiritual leader in any capacity, if you identify as a spiritual leader,
Mhm.
have a look at the code of ethics, sign up. If you're part of a spiritual organization, we have organization members too. And we have like over 500 individual members and maybe about 20 organizations have become members. So it's catching. We haven't done any advertising at all. It's catching
Wow.
people. Yeah.
Such
Yeah.
growth with no advertising.
Yeah. This is the second
Wow.
podcast where I've spoken about the Association for Spiritual
Okay.
Integrity. So we've been just, you know, talking at the back end and
Yeah.
trying to, what can we do? What can we do? How can we do it? So somehow it's catching. People want to do better. So come join us. Share your ideas. And if you have time and skills, help us because this is all voluntary. All voluntary.
Beautiful. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful note to end on, the hope
Yeah.
of come
Yeah.
join.
Yes.
Let's
Yes.
make the world a better place.
Indeed. Let's make the world a better place.
Oh, Jac, well, thank you again for coming. Well, for listeners, we'll put all of those links in the show notes and they can reach out to you. They feel
Wonderful.
called to do so.
Thank you
All
so
right.
much, Emily. I really appreciate this opportunity.
It's my pleasure.
Thanks so much for joining us for today's episode. To find more about our guest and their work, check the show notes or visit us at narmtraining.com/transformingtrauma.
Are you interested in deepening your understanding of NARM? We're excited to present The Inner Circle, NARM's online learning community. Each month, members receive direct mentorship from NARM creator Dr. Lawrence Heller and NARM training director Brad Kammer access to NARM demonstrations with extensive debriefs, and the opportunity to engage with the hub for the international NARM community. Dive in with a free 14-day trial and access the 3-month archive by visiting www.narmtraining.com/free trial. Thanks to Andrea Klunder and the Creative Imposter Studios for producing and editing, to Tori Essex for our album art, and to Brad Kammer for the creation of this podcast. We look forward to building community, connection with you, and changing the world by transforming trauma.